The governor, of course, comes back and says that the legislature needs to take pay cuts as well. Of course, the legislature and over has suffered some budget cuts. I myself have closed my district office and laid off three employees already. We're looking at potentially a 5% budget cut. That's kind of symbolic, though. I mean, many of my colleagues, including myself, are willing to take a 5% pay cut. But there's probably some greater reforms that we could do. What are some of the reforms? For me, I've just been assigned to a work group to move to a part-time legislature. In our Macomb Daily, on a virtually daily basis, we're seeing that they want a part-time legislature. At first, I wasn't a great supporter of that. I am now convinced that's the way to go. What are your thoughts with regard to part-time legislature? I know it's not a program that the Chamber fully endorses. What are your thoughts?
We haven't fully endorsed that proposal. What we are promoting and advocating is reforming term limits. We think the fact that this is the only sort of occupation where inexperience is what matters is not serving the state well. So we're really pushing that we lengthen term limits, not eliminate them. We don't think that's going to go over well. We've in fact done some public opinion and polling that confirms that. We think that legislators need more time to understand and fully implement their responsibilities. So that's what we're pushing. I mean, at least it's all in the same vein. We have not yet endorsed a part-time legislature option, but we do think nonetheless that there's a lot of areas and need for reform in the legislative arena.
So you're saying 12 years, I believe, in your proposal.
12 years, either in the House or in the Senate. It's really a proposal that gives more flexibility to the situation. So you don't have so much jockeying and maneuvering for your next legislative seat. You can actually take some time and get to know your responsibilities and your job.
What is your experience? What are you seeing as a lobbyist, a government affairs specialist, when state reps can only have 6 years experience, senators can only have 8 years experience? What are your experiences?
Well, I think this most recent debacle, really, with the budget issue coming to the absolute critical end, what we witnessed is just a lot of finger pointing and a lot of blame, a lack of trust. That's one thing. But also, you've got a lot of folks who are well-intentioned and they want to push their ideas, but they're pushing them without a lot of time to think through. The service tax is a perfect example of that. The business community has been saying for years, this is a bad, very bad proposal, very ill-conceived. But unfortunately, without a public hearing, no open meeting, and no ability to read the bills, legislators pass that in the dark of night. That process-wise is so damaging for Michigan and for the reputation of the state and the institution. That's just one example.
You're calling for transparency.
We are. We sure are.
Define that. Tell the people who are watching this program, what do we mean by transparency?
Taxpayers deserve the opportunity to work within a democracy, which includes public hearings, for instance. They should have the ability to see a bill introduced, then have an opportunity to read it and assess the impact on their family or on their business or their living environment. They should have that opportunity. Then they should have the opportunity to testify in a public hearing if they wish to. What we're witnessing lately is bills getting discharged for your members. You know, that's just no public hearing, sent right to the Senate or House floor, and then they're passed with no opportunity to comment. It's no way to run a democracy, really.
Ken, as far as the legislative reforms are concerned, what do you think with regard to the term limits, and what do you think with regard to a part-time legislature?
Most states have a part-time legislature.
Including Florida and Texas.
Texas, second largest state in the country, second largest population, geography and population both, pays their lawmakers $7,200 a year. We're second highest at 89, I think. So, you know, there's
79, but
70,
be that as it may.
70, I'm sorry.
There's a range.
We're number 2 either way. And so I think there's evidence that Michigan could get by with a part-time legislature. I don't know that there's any, you know, evidence that you can necessarily say states are better governed or not. You know, you get different types of outcomes that way.
And you would concur that a proportional pay cut as well?
Sure. I mean, if you're gonna, the legislature meets for 100 days a year in Michigan. I know that there's things legislators do outside of that time, particularly when it is a full-time legislature, more is expected of them and whatnot. You know, I'd have to look at the proposal somewhere between 7,200 and 79,000. There's some room for a different way of doing things if we decided to do it that way. Recognizing that's a symbolic change, that's a little tiny fraction of the $43 billion budget that we have in the state. So,
but certainly more significant than just saying we take a 5% cut.
It's a very popular change. It's a very popular change. We hear about it all the time. I've written about it, and we get people mentioning it when they call in to talk to us. I know other legislators have heard about it. So it's got a lot of traction, and it wouldn't be the end, you know, it wouldn't be a horrible thing to make the change, and it's got there's some reasons to argue for it. Regarding the term limits, we at the Mackinac Center, as far as I know, don't have an established position right now. We have a couple dozen employees, and you'll get a different opinion with each one of them. So I'll throw my own out there, which is they were established to reduce the size of government. There was a thought that we would be able to pass more constrained budgets if we didn't have lawmakers serving career jobs and protecting these things. I think the evidence is pretty clear that hasn't happened. By the same token, I don't generally buy into all of the concerns of some of the detractors. It seems to be a wash to me. So if they were extended or whatnot, I personally wouldn't be moved one way or the other about it.
Two old adages, God help us when the legislature is in session and the government governs best, which governs least. I'm starting to understand those as I become a veteran in the legislature. Sometimes when you have a full-time legislature and your energies are not focused on constituent concerns, perhaps you're sitting around justifying your full-time existence and maybe making too many laws. And in Michigan, I'm not sure we need more and more regulation, more and more law. It probably makes us economically less competitive. So God help us when the legislature's in session. I certainly am going to be working diligently on getting this proposal for a part-time legislature. You can see the mixed emotions right here at the table, but it sounds like the term limits experiment has been, I know the chamber is not happy with it. My experience, initially I thought it was perhaps a good idea, and it's not because I want to serve any longer. It really is that I've seen the inexperience. Yeah. You were a legislative staffer. Do you concur?
The best argument I've heard for the other side is that, you know, most of us, when we take a new job, it doesn't take us 6 months or a year to figure it out. You generally will get fired if it takes you that long to sort your job out. So I think, and personally, 7 years is the longest as an adult I've ever been in a job. So it doesn't seem unreasonable to have 6 years as the minimum amount of time that we'll let a legislator serve if they move on to the Senate, as you did, Senator. I don't know how many years you've been in so far, if you count your term.
You could actually serve 14 years. I would actually, with a 12-year proposal, I'm going to have 14 years, so it has no bearing on me.
Exactly. So, you know, there's room for lawmakers to make a fairly, you know, what is in this 21st century economy, a pretty substantial long career out of it under the present proposal. That's the other argument.
Trish, final thoughts with regard to what's going on here in Lansing?
Well, we certainly are hopeful that the budget really can get resolved before the end of the month. I mean, we're still in a 30-day continuation budget, and some of the signs are not rosy. We are working actively at the Michigan Chamber, along with now 50 other statewide business organizations, to try to repeal this service tax and focus, at least at the Chamber, on reductions in spending and real reforms. But nonetheless, that coalition, it's the Axe the Tax coalition, AX the Tax, and we'll have a website out. If we can't get it repealed through the legislature, we will go to the ballot with a statutory initiative to repeal that. So I encourage your viewers that they can check the Michigan Chamber's website if they'd like to help circulate petitions or sign one of those to repeal that. We're moving forward expeditiously on that.
Okay, now the governor is under the impression that government will not shut down because she's got her additional revenues with the tax increase. Do you agree or disagree?
I sure hope so, but unfortunately the so-called $400 million in cuts still to go, and I say so-called because they're really, I think for the most part, reductions in increases in spending.
Which is not a cut.
It's not a cut.
Well, that's all the time that we have for another edition of In Session with Senator Sanborn. Ken Braun, pleasure to have you on the show. Trish, great follow-up to the last show.
Thanks for having us.
Hopefully we'll get the cuts in place. Hopefully government will not have to shut down again. Appreciate both of you being on In Session with Senator Sanborn. Thanks very much for watching.